I will divide the detailed description of the various parts of the material energy into four categories. I will call these the unconscious, the preconscious, the subconscious, and the conscious realities, respectively. These are not Vedic terms, but they are easier to remember and understand for those who might not be well versed with terms like Maya, Shakti, and Prakriti. Maya is the unconscious, Shakti is the preconscious, Prakriti is the subconscious, and the conscious. Almost all of it is a private reality. Only at the last stage of the conscious reality development do we get something public. Therefore, if the study of matter is limited to public reality, disregarding the enormous complexity that lies in the private realm, then the true enormity of the material energy is not understood. Let's begin with the unconscious reality, which is called Maya. Maya is the perceived humiliation of the living entity in relation to the absolute truth. This perception is also a delusion because the absolute truth is just being himself rather than humiliating anyone else. But the living entity feels envious of the perfection in the absolute truth, and due to that envy, he is gripped by the feeling of powerlessness, worthlessness, and hopelessness, in contrast to the absolute truth. This negative feeling is Maya. It subdues the will of a person and makes him feel incapable. It has a paralyzing effect on a person because Maya makes a person unhappy. When a person is paralyzed due to a perceived self inadequacy, then he loses the capacity of will and starts feeling a nothingness. The will is one of the six aspects of a person, the other five being emotion, intention, cognition, connection, and relation. Therefore, when a person's will is humiliated, then the other five aspects are also constrained. The person feels bound and tied in various ways. These constraints are described extensively in Tantra texts and called Niyati, Raga, Vidya, Kala, and Kala. Niyati is the feeling that I don't deserve anything. Kala is the feeling that I have no power to do anything. Vidya is the feeling that I don't understand anything. Raga is the feeling that I don't enjoy anything. Kala is the feeling that I don't desire anything. We can understand the effect of Maya on a person by comparing it to the effect of a severe illness on the body. The whole body is paralyzed by illness. We lose the capacity to do anything, know anything, enjoy anything, want anything, and relate to anything. Sometimes a person feels he is going to die and he loses the desire to fight against the illness. Maya covers a living entity when it feels ashamed in relation to the absolute truth. The absolute truth is great and perfect. In contrast, the living entity feels that it is worthless. This, as we have discussed, is not necessary. The living entity can also be excited and motivated to serve the absolute truth after seeing its perfection and greatness. A person can also withdraw from that greatness to avoid having to face that greatness and perfection. He can then focus on his limited greatness and remain satisfied with it. In these cases, the person doesn't feel ashamed. Shame is the result of not feeling excited and motivated by the absolute truth, but rather becoming preoccupied with one's own imperfection and inferiority, and then becoming demotivated and depressed. This demotivated and depressed condition of the living entity is the state in which the universe doesn't exist. The living entity still exists, but it is so demotivated and depressed that it goes into the deep sleep state. The universe is annihilated, but the living entity is not freed from the material entanglement because of its own feeling of shame in comparison to the absolute truth. When the time for the creation of the universe arises, the living entity is woken up and stirred by Shakti or power. He feels energized and wants to conquer his feeling of shame. He proclaims that he is great, powerful, and capable. He wants to use his power to conquer his inferiority and establish his superiority. The feeling of empowerment is due to Shakti. When the Shakti is withdrawn, the living entity falls asleep because it is already depressed. But when the Shakti is imparted again, the living entity wakes up and develops the desire for establishing his superiority. This desire for superiority can be called the declaration of independence by the living entity. It is also called pradhana, which means the master, chief, or ruler. However, the Shakti with each living entity is very limited. It is further divided into 6 components pursuant to the 6 aspects of a person. The relational power is called karma. When this power is given, a living entity feels that there are opportunities for establishing his greatness. The intentional and emotional power is called prakriti. When this power is given, the living entity develops intentions for pleasure and starts enjoying the anticipation of its supremacy. The cognitive, conative, and willpower is called chitta. When this power is given, the living entity becomes capable of perceiving the material reality, creating the reality, and selecting or filtering parts of that material reality. The combination of chitta, guna, and karma is the sense in which the living entity is empowered to conquer his shame. We have to remember that even when the living entity is empowered with Shakti, his shame and inferiority have not disappeared. They have just been suppressed under the euphoria of power. Therefore, the moment a little bit of this power goes away, the living entity again falls into depression and nothingness. For example, when the opportunities created by karma disappear, then the living entity becomes depressed. He forgoes his resolve for enjoyment and loses interest in whatever enjoyment is available. He stops seeing greatness in the world, stops creating greatness, and stops choosing greatness. Therefore, shame and inferiority are always under the surface. They are temporarily suppressed due to the Shakti or power. The moment Shakti goes away, they reappear. Tantra philosophy goes deep into the analysis of this unconscious and preconscious reality. It explains why the living entity sometimes feels exuberant and motivated, and sometimes powerless and hopeless. The exuberant and motivated states are due to the presence of Shakti, and the powerless and hopeless states are due to the absence of Shakti that causes inferiority to resurface. The description of Maya is prominently found in the Shaiva Tantras, and the description of Shakti is prominently found in the Shakta Tantras. The Vaishnava Tantras prominently begin with the discussion of Chitta and what happens afterwards. This study is called Sāñkhya. In former times, when all the texts were studied simultaneously, there was a good understanding of all these texts combined together. At present, when the study of all the texts has declined, not many people are well versed in either Sāñkhya or Tantra, let alone a combination of both of these. Therefore, Sāñkhya and Tantra have come to be seen as different schools. Their followers and proponents have also separated. But if we understand them properly, that separation is neither necessary nor true. The Chitta is the material representation of the Chit aspect of the self. It is described in 3 ways in different places. Sometimes the Chitta is called a mirror that reflects reality. This represents the cognitive capacity of a person. Then the Chitta is compared to an ocean that generates waves. This represents the conative capacity of a person. Finally, the Chitta is compared to a veil that filters our cognitive and conative capacity. This represents the covering of the living entity that limits its abilities. We have earlier discussed the tripartite distinction between the ideal, the possible, and the impossible. The cognitive and conative capacities of the chitta represent the ideal and the possible, whereas the filtering aspect represents the impossible aspect. The combination of the ideal, possible, and impossible creates a material embodiment of a constrained version of the chit capacity of the self. We can call it the limited power within a person to know and act. From this combination of the ideal, possible, and impossible, the ideal separates as three components of chitta called the Mahatattva, Ahankara, and Buddhi. Mahatattva is all the personal values, morals, and the sense of rightness and wrongness. Ahankara is the personal goals of goodness. Each person thinks that his self interest is the highest good and the best goal. Ahankara is also a person's self image. Each person thinks that he is a good person, the center of the world, and the purpose for which everything exists. Therefore, Ahankara is also called pride and ego. Finally, the Buddhi is the collection of all beliefs. It constitutes what we consider to be the ideal truths. Whenever we create theories of reality, we axiomatize these personal beliefs as universal truths. Our beliefs about truth, the morals of rightness, and the goals of goodness are greatly influenced by our culture, society, civilization, ideology, and religion. Each culture, society, civilization, ideology, and religion creates beliefs about truths, morals of rightness, and goals of goodness. People living within a culture, society, civilization, ideology, and religion take their beliefs, morals, and goals to be ideal truths, rights, and goods. They remain unaware of other definitions of truth, right, and good. Therefore, the culture, society, civilization, ideology, and religion are sometimes considered our subconscious reality. We are not always aware of our personal beliefs, morals, and goals. We accept them by default. Therefore, they are the subconscious reality. This subconscious reality is used to judge whether something is true, right, and good. Since our beliefs, morals, and goals are accepted by default, therefore the judgments also happen by default. As many societies are becoming multicultural at present, the concept of subconscious bias has come to the forefront. The Mahatattva, Ahankara, and Buddhi are our subconscious bias. They are innate in each person, although they are greatly influenced by a person's culture, society, civilization, ideology, and religion. We can know them if we want, hence, they are not unconscious. The Mahatattva, Ahankara, and Buddhi are also the more manifest aspects of a person's superiority. People think that their morals, beliefs, and goals are superior to those of others. Mahatattva, Ahankara, and Buddhi are also sometimes called Prakriti instead of Shakti. This is not a contradiction if we understand the difference between the power to create beliefs, morals, and goals and the beliefs, morals, and goals created by that power. The sense of superiority comes from a greater estimation of one's power, and then superiority is imputed to the products of that power. All large civilizations consider themselves to be intellectually, morally, and intentionally superior. They think that they have greater powers to create beliefs, morals, and goals. The ideas, morals, and goals get imputed superiority as a result of their belief in their superior power. In modern time, for example, Western society considers itself to be racially, culturally, morally, intellectually, and intentionally superior than any other society. They go about spreading their civilization to the whole world because they think they are the superior civilization. This is because they have received the power of Shakti over the last few centuries. When that power of Shakti is taken away, then the same beliefs, morals, and goals lose the previously imputed superiority. Therefore, Shakti is the power and Prakriti is the byproducts of that power. The byproducts can exist even when the power is lost. Nobody cares about those byproducts when that happens. The distinction between Shakti and Prakriti is therefore often blurred. The same thing is called Prakriti in some places and then called Shakti in other places. The distinction is subtle but not irrelevant. Once we understand the unconscious, preconscious, and the subconscious, then we can discuss the conscious. It comprises the mind, senses, life force, properties, and their individual embodiments. In Sāñkhya, they are called Manas, Indriya, Prana, Tanamatra, and Bhuta. The Bhuta are the public or the external world. The Tanamatra are the properties of the world, namely the properties by which the world can be smelt, tasted, seen, touched, and heard. They exist both in the external world and in each person who perceives the world. Prana is the mechanism by which the senses and the mind interact with the world. Due to creating the interaction between the knower and known, the prana is neither confined to the knower or to the known. Indriya are the senses, namely hearing, touching, seeing, tasting, and smelling. Finally, the manas is the mind that combines the sensations obtained through the senses into a single object concept, such as a table or a chair. Thus, within the conscious realm, the bhuta are purely public. The tanmatra are both public and private. The prana is neither purely public nor purely private. The indriya and manas are purely private. Thus, the conscious realm is not easy to understand because it stretches from purely private to purely public, with both private and public, and neither private nor public realities. Anyone who thinks that they can model the conscious reality as either purely private or purely public will fail. Hence, neither pure realism nor pure idealism are true for conscious experience. The conscious reality, or what we have called actuality, can be divided into three components called manas, pran, and vak. The first comprises the mind and the senses, the second comprises the life force, and the third comprises the sense objects and their properties. This tripartite distinction can be called the distinction between the seer, seen, and seeing. The mind and the senses are the seer. The sense objects and their properties are the seen, and the life force is the power of seeing. Sāñkhya describes them as three aspects of the self-image or ahankara. The senses and the mind are the sattvic aspect of ahankara. The life force is the rajasic aspect of ahankara. The sense objects and their properties are the tamasic aspect of ahankara. The sattvic aspect of ahankara is the first person experience. The rajasic aspect of ahankara is the second person experience. The tamasic aspect of ahankara is the third person experience. Ahankara combines the first, second, and third person experiences. We can imagine the situation to be like a three-sided coin. Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic are three sides, and Ahankara is the coin. We can illustrate this distinction by an example. Suppose we are looking at a bird. We can see the colored wings of the bird and how it flies. But we don't know what it means to be within the bird body. Only other birds can understand what it means to be in a bird body. However, even other birds cannot know exactly what a specific bird sees or thinks. Only a specific bird experiences its personal sensations and thoughts. Based on these distinctions, we can talk about first, second, and third person experiences. Humans looking at a bird is third person experience. A bird looking at another bird is second person experience. And each bird experiencing their private and personal sensations and thoughts is the first person experience. The ahankara is the self-image of a living entity. The self-image is divided into three components to constitute the first, second, and third person experiences. They are all part of the ahankara and yet not the same. We can also call these three the individual reality, the contextual reality, and the universal reality. The wings of the bird are universal reality because anyone can observe them. One bird understanding another bird is contextual reality because only birds can understand that. Finally, the personal experience of a bird is individual reality because only that bird understands it. The contextual reality denotes that which everyone cannot understand, but those embedded in the same culture, society, religion, ideology, civilization, or the type of mind and body can understand. Their understanding is approximate rather than precise. For example, someone who has had fever before can understand what someone else who has fever currently is experiencing. This is an approximate idea and is called anumana in Vedic epistemology. It is not blind speculation, it is a reasonable guess. Someone who has never had fever cannot even understand what it means to have fever, but he can measure the body temperature. Therefore, body temperature is third person experience. Knowing what it means to have fever is second person experience. And experiencing fever is first person experience, which is also called pratyaksha. Our personal identity comprises these three components. But modern science just studies third person experiences. It can measure temperature, but it has no idea how it feels to have fever. The second and first person experiences are disregarded by modern science.